This is DW Business. I'm Kate Ferguson. Thanks for joining me. Delegates from all over the world are in Geneva today to discuss ways to end child labour. According to the International Labour Organization, about 1 in 10 of all youngsters globally are working. That's around 160 million children. Now, in most cases, they are deprived of a formal education, making it all the more difficult to access a better future. Child labour is most prevalent in Central African countries such as Niger, Chad and Cameroon. The Asia-Pacific region ranks second, with the problem especially acute in Nepal. Now, children often work in dangerous conditions, mining raw materials that end up in products sold around the world, or in factories making garments sold in the high street. Earlier this month, the European Parliament approved new legislation that will require large companies to perform due diligence on their supply chains, including keeping track of whether their partners are infringing on child labour laws. Now, to talk more about this, let's bring in Benjamin Smith. He's a child labour specialist at the International Labour Organization and is joining us from Geneva. Hi, Benjamin. Good to see you. I want to ask you about your assessment of the EU's supply chain law. Will it make a tangible difference?
Well, considering that between 9 and 26% of those 160 million children that you mentioned that are in child labor, 9 to 26% are in global supply chains, it is critically important that business step up and meet their responsibility to operate ethically without recourse to child labor in their supply chains. Now, there is no evidence that the supply chain legislation, mandatory due diligence in and of itself has an impact. They're not set up to measure it, so it's difficult to say. However, we have come out and very clearly said that a mix of regulation, policy coherence, and market-based incentives are critical for responsible business conduct, and mandatory due diligence can play an important role in that. So an EU-wide approach makes sense in that it promotes coherence. So it's rather than having numerous national initiatives, you have one kind of level playing field for Europe, and it can increase transparency. We know that transparency along supply chains is critical to eliminating child labor. So that due diligence that is promoted should cover the entire supply chain. Many times legislation doesn't require that, but that really risks ignoring exactly where child labor is most acute, at far upstream end of supply chains in the production of primary materials. So coherence with international standards. If those pieces of legislation have ILO standards well reflected in them, then absolutely they can be helpful and certainly to be encouraged in terms of business due diligence. Sure.
Now, we saw there that the problem is especially prevalent in Africa. What are governments there doing to tackle child labour?
Yes, well, today is World Day Against Child Labor, and we heard from the DRC, in fact, about new efforts to set up a child labor monitoring system in the mining sector in DRC. As you and your viewers may know, much of the minerals that go into our cell phones and electric vehicles for the batteries and so on come from DRC. So this is really important measure, recruiting new labor inspectors to be able to enforce the legislation. Overall, the Central Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa in general faces huge challenges in terms of enforcement, in terms of providing that free, good quality education that is so critical to eliminate child labor. And on top of that, it's a region that's marked by conflict and crises. So adding to the difficulties. The implementation is the question. The Sub-Saharan Africa has ratified ILO conventions. They've got policies and national action plans in place, but they also need support to have the resources required to get after the root causes of child labor, primarily household poverty.
All right, Benjamin Smith, specialist at the International Labour Organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you.